Jennifer Francis. Narrated by Marie Hawkins. I just need 2 minutes of your time. Jayla pleaded with the future alpha of her pack, Alpha Nathan, of the Blood Moon Pack. She had a hand on his arm. He was frowning down at that hand. Then those deep, dark blue eyes she had once drowned in glared at her touch in a deep, disapproving manner. They had been lovers casually for just over a year now, but it was all over now. He had found his fated mate, gifted to him by the moon goddess herself. And just like that, he no longer had even a minute to spare for her. Jayla had loved him with all she had, her whole heart, even though she had known this day would come. She had always kept the relationship with him light, playful, and fun, so he would never know she was in love with him. He was not her fated mate, nor she his. She just wanted to wish him well and let him know that she was going to leave and finish her law degree on campus full-time. That she would be interning on her breaks, and she wouldn't be coming home for the next 2 years at least. Jayla just couldn't watch him with his fated mate, watch how happy they would be, how in love, see them around making out and getting all hot and heavy, when it used to be her and him. It would just cause too much heartache. She would never tell him that, though. As she stood there clinging to his arm, pleading for just 2 minutes of his time, she was trying to smile up at him brightly like she always did. His fated mate Sophia walked into the room, glared at Jayla and the way she was holding on to him. Sophia did not care about the fact that Nathan and Jayla had been friends since childhood. For 20 years, they had known each other, a fun friendship that she cherished.
A lot of them.
Sophia's wolf snarled at the sight before her and Sophia yelled, "Get your filthy, dirty paws off my mate." She had stalked over and yanked Jayla's hand off his arm and yanked her away from Nathan. Her other hand had stuck her, slapping her face so hard that Jayla staggered a step backwards, her hand touching her now stinging cheek. Cora, Jayla's wolf, roared with rage inside of her mind. At the hurt and pain, the sheer viciousness of the sudden attack. Cora had raced forward, ripping to the surface before Jayla could stop her, and with claws pushing out of her fingertips, stuck Sophia right back. A full slap to her face, all claws out, tearing through the skin on the future Luna's face, leaving 3 bloody scratches down her face, the blood dripping off her onto her clothes. Sophia had screamed in pain from the attack on her own face, clutching at her face with both hands, her eyes turning to her mate as tears spilled down her bloody face. Jayla knew she would heal, and quickly. She had a wolf. Nathan's blue eyes had widened at the sight of his mate's injury. He reached out for his mate and cradled her in his arms, holding her to his chest to comfort her. His blue eyes turned to Jayla. They were so filled with rage, his wolf right there with him. He roared in anger at the pain inflicted on his mate by her. "Leave this pack, don't you ever come back." Jayla stared at him, horrified by his words, tears brimming in her green eyes. It was treason to attack the Luna or Alpha, or even the future Luna or Alpha of your pack. And her wolf had just done that, attacked the future Luna with claws out. She turned and hurried out of his office. If she stayed a minute longer, she would only incur further punishment, or perhaps death. Cora whined in distress and pain at leaving him, leaving their home, leaving their family. She knew, as did Jayla, they would never be allowed to come home again. If he had been the actual Alpha, she would have just been banished and marked as rogue with nowhere to go. Jayla's steps quickened as she headed out the pack house front door, till she was running with tears streaming down her face. She headed for her car. She didn't dare stay a minute longer. What if he changed his mind? What if his mate changed his mind on her punishment and wanted her beaten and imprisoned or dead? There was no time to say goodbye to her family, her mom, dad, or her older brother. She just ran, tears streaming, and headed for her car. She heard the future beta of the pack, Jackson, call out after her. "Jayla, what's wrong?" There was concern in his voice, but she didn't stop to tell him, just got in the car and drove away as fast as she could to get off pack territory, before worse was to come. At least he hadn't had the power to demote her to a worthless rogue on the spot. Her only blessing at the time. It could still happen, though. His father, Alpha Blaine, would choose whether or not that was still to come. He would hear Sophia and Nathan's side of the story and judge her from it. "Why?" Jayla asked her wolf Cora, sobs racking her as she drove away back to the university she had spent the past 2 years studying at. Lucky for her, she lived on campus and had a dorm to retreat to, somewhere to go. Now she couldn't return to her pack. "Protect Pup." Cora howled in pain. Jayla's tears burned even more. Her heart ached so much she didn't know if she could endure it. A baby. His baby. And he had just tossed her away like garbage and forbidden her to return. The pain in her chest and inside of Cora felt as though it was ripping them apart. But they had to endure it, survive it for their pup.
But you're so worried about
Chapter 1.
Garbage on your bed.
Jayla.
Playing trash on your bed.
She stared at the letter in her hand. Her hand was shaking so badly as she looked down at it. It had been 6 long years since she had fled the Blood Moon Pack. And now here she stood, looking at an envelope with her pack seal on it. His seal. She lifted her eyes from the envelope to the beautiful boy playing with his sisters on the floor of the living room of her apartment. This is not happening. It can't be. They had somehow survived and moved on with their lives, were living peacefully well away from the pack. She had never returned, just like he told her. To this day, she was still somehow a member of the Blood Moon Pack. By the grace of Goddess, Alpha Blaine had never severed her from the pack. She was still tied to it in some small way. Her 3 children were playing and roughhousing with each other. Jayla had just gotten home from the law firm Stanton & Co. where she worked in the human world, as far away from Wolfen society as she could get. Had stayed away even when she had desperately needed her family. Learned to live alone. How to be strong for her children. Made friends in the human world. Created a somewhat human family attachment to help ease her pain and loneliness. Her son, so handsome and strong-willed, filled with determination and courage, just like his father, had blonde tousled hair and naturally tan skin. He was so beautiful and full of life. He looked up at her with his brilliant green eyes. Her eyes. It was the only thing he had gotten from her. Everything else was from his father, a man who hated her. The girls also had blonde hair and green eyes. She let their hair grow long. It was wavy like hers, but not dark brown like hers. Their temperament was much softer than her son. He was much bigger and stronger, and was their protector at all times, though he was only born 3 minutes earlier. Little Nate was a good 2 inches taller than his identical sisters Lily and Rosalie. Most people thought he was their older brother about a year apart, and Jayla did not delusion them. She stepped into her kitchen, leaving them to play as they were, her eyes turning to the envelope in her hand. Cora, too, was quiet in her mind, not certain what was about to happen to them or their lives. She could feel concern ebbing off of Cora. It was filtering down into her, too. She opened the letter and read it. Jayla Freeman, you have been officially recalled back to Blood Moon Pack. You will respond to this letter within 7 days and let it be known the day of your return. Alpha Nathan, Blood Moon Pack. How he had found her, she did not know, but she was not going back. Taking a match, she lit the gas stove and set the letter in its envelope on fire, and watched it burn to ash. Defying him was not something that she should do, but she could never go back. Not ever. Turning to her mobile phone, Jayla started looking at listings for a new place to live. She had to move in quickly. It took 4 days to find a place that was available right away. It was not close to her office, though. She now had a commute. Jayla paid out the lease on this current apartment, as she was breaking it, and moved her and her children as fast as she could, leaving her lovely beachfront apartment for one further in the city. It was larger and the price was the same. It had more room for the kids to play. It had a doorman and night security, so at least she wasn't about to be surprised or ambushed. Jayla moved the children to a new school as well. She had never truly hidden herself, just stayed away at all cost. Even Cora had to suffer, never truly getting the freedom she so deserved. Hardly ever got a chance to run free. Living in this human city took a toll on her. It was like being punished every day for one tiny crime. One mistake to protect her unborn pups, and they had suffered for it. That suffering had made them both stronger-willed, and no more did they let their heart decide anything. Only logic and reality of a situation weighed in. No wolves were allowed in their world either. Not anymore. Stanton & Co. law firm had been home to them since passing the bar exam. She had Lauren and Tony, her most trusted human friends. Lauren had delivered her pups, their unexpected arrival during a lunch meeting with Tony, whose wife had been visiting. She was a doctor, thank goodness. All 3 of them had been birthed in his office at the university. She recalled crying after they had come, having no help to raise them. She told Tony and Lauren she had no family and their father didn't care, which was true. They had taken pity on her, a 20-year-old with triplets and no family to help her out. They had been there for her, So much so she now looked at them as her surrogate family, a second mom and dad. Not that she actually called them that. No one knew what she was, who her children's father was. Those things were still a secret she would take to her grave. Humans had no idea about Wolfen society, and she was not allowed to let them in on the knowledge either. Wolfen society law. The next official letter arrived at her residence 10 days after she moved. A shiver ran through her. Moving had not worked. She returned it to sender, not at this address, and prayed to the goddess that would be the end of it. 2 weeks later, another letter came. Again, she returned it to sender, unopened and with the same message, not at this address. She prayed to he had ordered her as much.
Peanut butter. No, seriously, smell it. I just want to eat it so badly.
Can you take some medicine? Can you hand me some medicine?
Yes.
Yeah. No.
I think that apple juice is spoiled.
It's not. Brand new break out. I need something to drink. Apple juice.
Apple juice. That's good.
Can I have some apple juice?
It's spoiled.
It's not spoiled. I just got open right now.
You don't
Chapter
want
2.
it.
Yes, I do want it.
Nathan.
Fine.
In his hand was the second returned official letter he had sent to bring her back to the pack. The first had not been returned. He knew she would have opened it. Curiosity would have gotten the better of her if she had not felt the responsibility to answer her alpha's
You
letter.
don't have to have it.
Nathan knew that they had not parted on good terms, but it was time Jayla returned home. He had seen her on TV by mere chance, standing outside the front of a courthouse, speaking to the press about the case she had just won for a client she was representing in a high-profile divorce case. 6 long years had passed, and she seemed bright, strong, and filled with confidence. She had looked amazing dressed to kill in that dark blue skirt that was tight all the way down to her knees, and a soft green blouse which had clung to her body in the breeze.
Thank you.
Her bright green eyes, it seemed so full of
I'll
life.
just see.
Her comments to the press were straight to the
Over
point.
there, talk
No
about
nonsense, and she didn't
birthday
answer
dress.
anything torrid or gossipy. Life away from the pack seemed to suit her. His chest had ached a little, knowing he was the reason why she was out there and not here.
Thank you.
He and Havoc, his wolf, had watched her with great interest. She had always wanted to be a lawyer, work in the pack's legal department. Not much cause for divorce lawyers in the Wolfen Society, but contract law was rife, and if he remembered correctly, that was what she was specializing in while studying. They had watched from the lounge in the common room as Beta, Jackson, Gamma, Steven, and Delta, Ethan, had all also seen her on the TV that night, as all 4 of them had been having a drink and hunting for a movie to watch to wind down after a long day. Jackson had been in charge of the remote and was flicking through the channels where her beautiful face had popped up on the screen. Her name and law firm were rolling across the bottom of the screen. It was a recap of the news of the day in the human world. None of them had seen her since that day, the day he had forced her to leave. She had left and never come back, just as he ordered her to. Looking at her beautiful face, she had grown into a very beautiful young woman, just 26 now. Listening to her voice, he had felt a pang of regret, and now realized he missed his longtime friend. They'd grown up together, trained together, and been lovers once. Now there was nothing, and she was gone. Bring her home. Havoc had growled at him, and had been relentless in the days that followed to bring her home. Just wouldn't shut up about it. And so he agreed with his wolf and made the decision that it was time to bring her home to the pack where she belonged. So he had sent the first official letter to her after Jackson had tracked her down. It hadn't been that hard, less than a day. Clearly, she wasn't hiding, just staying away. Now, he sat in his office over a month later, annoyed and verging on angry. She had ignored the first letter, or so he thought. There was a possibility she had not gotten it. But he didn't think that was it. Jackson would not have made a mistake. They had all grown up together, and she had been just as good a friend with him as she had been with Nathan. Actually, Jackson had been really pissed off about her sudden leaving by Nathan's order. That day, Nathan had been angered, and so had Havoc, and they had responded without much thought. That fateful day he'd sent her away, acted solely on instinct, but had not given it much thought since that day either. Not till he'd seen her on the TV. Sophia had been really pissed off that she had not been stripped of rank and turned from the pack by his father, Alpha Blaine, at the time. She had demanded that Jayla be made a brogue for the insult, but his father had simply stated, no, it's inappropriate under the circumstances. Those circumstances being that he knew that Jayla and Nathan had been sleeping together for just over a year, and he felt there was more to it, and Sophia had probably overreacted. Due to the move she had made that week, the letter should have arrived. It was possible that she hadn't received it, but there was also the possibility that she had read it and ignored it, moved to avoid him. Turning the letter over in his hand, he looked at his beta. So this is how it's gonna play out. You did order her to leave and never come back, Jackson replied simply. If she didn't get the first letter and return the other two, perhaps she doesn't know the content. He was leaning casually against the wall. He appeared bored. Nathan returned his attention to the envelope and stared at it for a long time, trying to decide a course of action. He nodded to himself after several minutes of contemplation. All right, let's make it really official. Something she can't just ignore without the threat of retrieval. His eyes moved to his beta. Jackson sighed heavily and turned those gray eyes on him, a frown on his face. You sure, boss? You want to do that? Yes, Nathan replied firmly. Send it to her law firm and make it to be signed for so we know she got it. His mouth quirked in a smug smile. Let's see you ignore me now, little wolf, he thought. I can play as well as you can, only you can't ignore me. I am your alpha, and you will do as I command.
Did you know spoons work as well as cups?